This is Brian J. Matos back exclusively on YouTube answering your listener questions. Thank you again for continuing to send them in. First question this week is from Cynthia. She's in British Columbia, Canada. Cynthia asks, in a world increasingly shaped by artificial intelligence, where do you see the biggest disconnect between public perception and actual impact, especially across global economies? That is a great question. That is a huge question. And I don't know that I'm the best person to answer it yet. In fact, we have guests coming on that are going to talk about many elements of artificial intelligence, including we have a guest coming up that's going to talk about the AI revolution in the military and the use of AI with drones. That is a conversation that's going to blow your mind. So stay tuned for that episode coming very soon. And you can get that here on the YouTube channel. And of course, you can subscribe to my podcast and be the first to be notified when the podcast is published. But we've talked a lot about AI on this program over the last couple of seasons. So I will simply say this in terms of the disconnect between perception and impact. The perception, I think, has been that AI is going to solve all of our complex problems and it's going to replace everybody's job. The actual impact has been fairly muted so far. There have been incremental increases in productivity. There's certainly been some nice benefits for individuals and businesses who have started to implement AI, but quite frankly, the impact so far has been fairly modest, fairly benign, in some cases humorous. It's been sort of a plaything for some organizations, certainly for individuals, but we're in the very, very early days of this. What I do think, though, is AI will likely have a significant positive role to play in increasing productivity in a world that's going to need it. Because if we are going to be a world with fewer and fewer people because of the demographic trends that are already set in stone, each individual human is going to have to be more productive for us to continue to have not just economic growth, but just intellectual growth, societal growth, growth in culture. And I do think the next generation that will be AI natives who grow up with these tools will probably unlock the real treasures that are still to be had. It's possible that, like other tools that came before it, like other innovations, it'll be harder for older generations to know exactly how to use these tools and unlock their value. I think it is the current young generation, folks who are still in middle school, working their way maybe through high school, maybe not yet in college. These tools are in their hands and they've never known a world without them. And I suspect it's that generation that's going to unlock some of the biggest values. So I think there's a lot to come. I think it's going to be good for the global economy. It's going to make us more productive. It's going to solve many problems. It will bring plenty of challenges and threats with us. But the disconnect so far has been this idea that that's all already here, when the reality is the impacts have been relatively modest and there's a lot of innovation still left before we start feeling the benefits in our everyday life. All right, the second question is from George, also from Canada. It's Canada Day here. He's from Toronto. George asks, what habits or practices have helped you stay informed without burning out in an age of constant crisis headlines and geopolitical volatility? Well, I don't recommend this, but I am a voracious consumer of headlines and news, and the key to me is to get as many perspectives and sources as possible. So I have dozens and dozens and dozens of sources of news, information, trends, but I think the most important habit or practice for me is to step away from some of that and get into things that I just personally enjoy, whether it's following my favorite sports teams in the U.S. or around the world, following a little bit of pop culture. I'm not going to be the savviest person in that, but, watch a movie, watch a television show, spend some time getting lost in a book. Take your mind off of those headlines, get into the zeitgeist of what's happening in everyday life. And if you have young people in your life, whether they're teenagers, whether they're young kids, maybe they're just people who are getting started in their careers. If you've got somebody who's 15, 20 years younger than you, or if you've got kids in your life, just have a conversation with them. Ask them how they see the world. Ask them what's happening in their social groups. You'll be surprised how talkative kids can be, and they'll tell you about what they're thinking, seeing, and feeling. And I think that habit and that practice of getting out of the headlines, as diverse as the headlines might be that you collect, and just listening to pop culture that's not political and not economic and absorbing those trends around you and observing them, and talking to people who are in very different generations than you and listening to their perspective, especially the younger generation that just sees everything differently than so many of us do. Those are the two tips that I can give you. Thank you for your questions. Keep them coming every week. I will try every week to get back on YouTube and answer those questions. And we are now in the midst of season 3. We've got episodes posting almost every week now. We'll be skipping some just given the holiday schedule in the United States and around the world that comes with summer. But we've got great episodes that are going to be released on a regular basis now. We are into season 3, and I look forward to hearing your questions about those episodes. So these have all been great so far. You're asking me questions about how I think about things, how I process things, how I prepare for these shows and these interviews. But as the interviews come out, I would love to hear from you on questions you have about those interviews, comments you have about those interviews, feedback about them. Keep that coming. We'll keep this conversation going. Keep coming back to this YouTube channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so, both to my YouTube channel so you get exclusive content like this, and also to the podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms so that you can be the first to hear new episodes when they're released. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll all stay curious.